At 12:47 p.m. on the 20th of December 1943, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler pulled his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6 alongside a crippled B-17 Flying Fortress, limping across the German coast at 1,000 feet, close enough to see the American pilot's face through the shattered cockpit window. 28 years old, 27 confirmed kills. One mission away from the Knight's Cross. The B-17 had no right to be flying. Number 2. Engine gone. Number 4. Engine smoking. Tail section shredded by cannon fire. Wounded crew visible through massive holes in the fuselage. Standard doctrine said, finish it. One burst from his 20mm cannons, and the bomber would explode. Stigler's 28th kill. The medal would be his. But something stopped him. The American tail gunner's guns were pointing skyward, not tracking him, not threatening him, just pointing at nothing. The gunner was either dead or out of ammunition. Stigler looked into the bomber's waist windows. He saw wounded men. He saw blood on the interior walls. He saw a crew that had already been through hell and somehow survived. And he made a decision that would haunt him for 46 years. He would not shoot. Instead, he would escort them home. If you want to see why Stigler chose mercy over glory, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories of humanity in war. Subscribe for Forgotten Acts of Honor. Back to Stigler. Franz Stigler was born on the 21st of August 1915 in Regensburg, Bavaria. His father was a World War I fighter pilot who taught Franz one fundamental rule: never shoot a man in a parachute. Honor matters more than kills. A warrior fights other warriors, not helpless men. That lesson would define the most important moment of Franz Stigler's life. Stigler joined the Luftwaffe in 1937. He trained as a fighter pilot, but was initially assigned to transport duties. He flew Junkers Ju-52 transports in North Africa, evacuating wounded soldiers from desert airstrips. He saw what war did to men: the burns, the shrapnel wounds, the amputations. He carried 900 wounded soldiers out of Africa before he was finally assigned to fighters. In 1942, Stigler transferred to Jägerschwader 27, flying Bf 109s in North Africa. He scored his first kill on the 6th of November 1942, a P-40 Warhawk over Libya. Clean kill, no pilot bailout. Stigler felt nothing. Just a job. Just another enemy aircraft removed from the sky. By December 1943, Stigler had 27 confirmed kills. P-40s Spitfires, B-24 Liberators, B-17 Flying Fortresses. He was a professional fighter pilot, skilled, disciplined, effective. One more kill, and he would receive the Knight's Cross, Nazi Germany's highest military honor. Every Luftwaffe pilot wanted the Knight's Cross. It meant recognition, respect, promotion. On the 20th of December, 1943, Stigler was stationed at Jever Airfield in northern Germany. His unit, Jägerschwader 27, had been transferred from Africa to defend against American bomber raids. The mission briefing that morning was simple: intercept American bombers returning from Bremen, finish off any stragglers. At 12:31 p.m. Stigler took off. His Bf 109 G6 was armed with 130mm Mk108 cannon, firing through the propeller hub, and two 13mm MG131 machine guns in the engine cowling. Total ammunition: 60 rounds of 30mm, 600 rounds of 13mm. More than enough to destroy a heavy bomber. Weather was poor. Cloud cover at 2,000 feet. Visibility 3 miles. Temperature 2 degrees Celsius. Perfect conditions for damaged bombers to slip through German defenses unnoticed. Stigler climbed through the clouds, searching for targets. At 12:47 p.m., he spotted something at 1,000 feet. A B-17 Flying Fortress. Alone, flying slow, trailing smoke. Stigler descended to investigate. As he got closer, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The bomber was destroyed. Not damaged. Destroyed, and somehow still flying. The B-17's number 2 engine was completely gone, just an empty nacelle with torn metal edges. Number 4, engine was running but streaming dark smoke. The tail section looked like it had been hit by a sawmill. Horizontal stabilizer shredded vertical stabilizer, mostly missing. Rudder hanging by control cables. The fuselage had holes big enough to climb through. Stigler could see straight through the bomber from one side to the other. This was Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown's B-17, nicknamed Ye Old Pub. Brown was 21 years old, on his first combat mission as aircraft commander. The bombing run over Bremen had gone catastrophically wrong. German fighters had swarmed the formation. Ye Old Pub had taken hits from FW-190s and Bf-109s. The initial attacks killed the tail gunner, wounded the radio operator, destroyed 2 engines, and knocked out most of the defensive armament. Then a German fighter had made a head-on attack. 20mm cannon shells punched through the nose section, exploding in the cockpit. The co-pilot was wounded in the shoulder. The navigator took shrapnel in the leg. Brown was hit in the right shoulder by shell fragments. Blood filled the cockpit. The B-17 fell out of formation, spiraling down from 27,000 feet. Brown regained control at 1,000 feet. He was semi-conscious from blood loss and hypoxia. The co-pilot was barely functional. The flight engineer was dead. The navigator was unconscious. The radio operator was wounded. The ball turret gunner had passed out from oxygen deprivation. The waist gunners were wounded. The tail gunner was dead in his position. Brown had no idea how to get home. His compass was shattered. His radio was destroyed. His oxygen system was offline. He was flying at 1,000 feet because he couldn't climb higher without oxygen. He pointed the B-17 west and hoped that was the right direction. That is when Franz Stigler found him. Stigler pulled alongside the B-17's right wing 50 feet away. He looked into the cockpit. He saw Brown slumped over the controls, blood on his face, struggling to stay conscious. He saw the co-pilot trying to help but clearly wounded himself. He looked back through the bomber's interior. Wounded men everywhere. The waist gunner was slumped against the fuselage wall, not moving. Another crew member was trying to bandage someone's head. Stigler glanced at the tail. The tail guns were elevated, not tracking him. He flew closer. The tail gunner was draped over his guns, clearly dead. The waist gunner's 50 calibers machine guns were pointing at random angles. Nobody was manning them. This wasn't a combat aircraft anymore. It was a flying hospital, a collection of wounded men trying desperately to get home. Stigler's training said shoot it down. Luftwaffe doctrine said finish damaged bombers before they reach the coast. His commanding officer would expect him to claim the kill. He needed just one more victory for the Knight's Cross, but Stigler remembered his father's words. Never shoot a man in a parachute. These men were helpless. They couldn't fight back. They were already defeated. Shooting them would be murder, not combat. Stigler made his decision in 3 seconds. He would not shoot. Instead, he would try something that had never been done before. He would escort the bomber to safety. He pulled ahead of the B-17 and tried to signal Brown. He pointed at Sweden, neutral territory, 140 miles northeast. If Brown flew to Sweden, the crew would be interned but alive. Brown didn't understand. He kept flying west toward England. Stigler flew alongside again, closer this time, 30 feet away. He could see Brown looking at him with confusion. Why wasn't this German pilot shooting? Stigler gestured again, pointed north, made landing gestures. Brown shook his head. He was going home to England or dying trying. At 12:53 p.m., Ye Olde Pub crossed the German coast. They were over the North Sea now. German anti-aircraft batteries along the coast saw the B-17. They prepared to fire, standard procedure. Shoot down all Allied aircraft regardless of condition. Stigler saw the flak batteries tracking the bomber. He did something insane. He flew in close formation with the B-17, right on its wing, clearly visible to the German gunners. He was marking the bomber as under escort. He was telling the anti-aircraft crews, "This aircraft is under my protection. Do not fire." The flak batteries didn't fire. They were confused. Why was a Luftwaffe fighter escorting an American bomber? Was this some kind of ruse? Was the bomber captured? The gunners held their fire uncertain. Stigler stayed with the B-17 for 4 more minutes, escorting it over the German coastal defenses. At 12:57 p.m., they were 10 miles offshore. British territory was another 40 miles ahead. Stigler's fuel gauge was reading critical. He had maybe 10 minutes of flight time remaining before he'd be swimming in the North Sea. He pulled alongside Brown one final time. Brown looked at him. Their eyes met through the shattered cockpit glass. 2 pilots, same age, different uniforms, one trying to get his crew home, the other trying to let him. Stigler saluted. A formal military salute, respect between warriors. Then he rolled his Bf 109 right, dove toward the wave tops, and disappeared into the gray North Sea weather. Brown watched the German fighter vanish. He didn't understand what had just happened. Why had that German pilot not shot him down? Why had he escorted them? Why had he saluted? Brown was too exhausted, too wounded, too focused on survival to process it. He pointed, "Ye old pub," toward England, and kept flying. At 1:47 p.m., Ye Old Pub crossed the English coast. Brown found a small RAF base at Seething and made an emergency landing. The B-17 hit the runway hard. The landing gear collapsed, and the aircraft skidded to a stop in a cloud of dirt and torn metal. Ground crew ran to the wreck. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The B-17 had over 400 bullet and cannon holes. 2 engines were destroyed. The tail was barely attached. The cockpit was covered in blood. How this aircraft had flown was mechanically impossible. Brown and his surviving crew were evacuated to the base hospital. The co-pilot needed surgery for his shoulder wound. The navigator had severe leg wounds. The radio operator had shrapnel in his chest. The ball turret gunner had frostbite and hypoxia damage. 3 crew members were dead. The intelligence officers debriefed Brown the next day. He told them about the German pilot who had escorted them. The officers didn't believe him. German fighters don't escort American bombers. They shoot them down. Brown must have been hallucinating from blood loss and hypoxia. They marked his report as unreliable. Brown tried to explain. The German pilot flew right beside them. He gestured toward Sweden. He prevented the coastal batteries from firing. He saluted before leaving. The intelligence officers nodded politely and dismissed his account. Combat, stress does strange things to perception. Brown eventually stopped talking about it. Franz Stigler landed at Jever at 1:03 p.m. He reported engine trouble, said he'd had to break off his patrol early, didn't mention the B-17, didn't claim a kill. His commanding officer asked why he hadn't engaged any targets. Stigler said the weather was too poor, visibility too limited. That night, Stigler told his wingman what he'd done. The wingman was horrified. "If anyone finds out, they'll court-martial you, probably execute you. Refusing to engage enemy aircraft is treason." Stigler understood the risk, but he'd made his choice. He could live without the Knight's Cross. He couldn't live with murdering helpless men. For the next 46 years, neither pilot spoke about the incident. Brown because no one believed him. Stigler because it could get him killed. Even after the war ended, Stigler remained silent. He'd violated Luftwaffe regulations. He disobeyed direct orders to engage enemy aircraft. He'd potentially aided the enemy. In 1943 Germany, that was treason. Even decades later, the shame remained. In 1986, Charlie Brown was at a veterans reunion. He was 64 years old, retired from the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel. He'd spent 43 years wondering about the German pilot who had saved his life. He'd tried to find him after the war, but had no information. No name, no unit, no identification. At the reunion, Brown mentioned the incident to a friend. The friend said, "You should try to find him. Write to veteran organizations. Maybe he is still alive. Brown spent 4 years searching. He wrote to German veteran organizations. He contacted Luftwaffe historical societies. He described the date, location, aircraft types. He asked, "Does anyone know a fighter pilot who escorted a B-17 on the 20th of December 1943? In January 1990, Brown received a letter from Canada. It was from Franz Stigler. He was 74 years old, living in Vancouver. He'd seen Brown's inquiry in a newsletter. The description matched exactly. Stigler knew it was the same B-17. After 46 years, he finally had a chance to explain why. They arranged to meet in Seattle. On the 10th of June 1990, Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler saw each other for the first time since that December day in 1943. Brown walked up to Stigler, and before either man could speak, they embraced. Two old warriors, crying, holding each other. "I've waited 46 years to say thank you," Brown said. "I've waited 46 years to know you survived," Stigler replied. They spent 3 days together. They reconstructed what had happened. Brown described the mission, the damage, his wounds. Stigler described his decision, his fear of being discovered, his relief that Brown had survived. They compared their lives. Both had married, raised families, built careers. Both had carried the memory of that day for nearly half a century. Brown asked the question that had haunted him. "Why didn't you shoot me down? You could have had your 28th kill. The Knight's Cross would have been yours." Stigler thought for a long moment, then answered, "My father taught me never to shoot a man in a parachute. When I saw your bomber, your men were effectively in a parachute. You were defenseless, wounded, helpless. Shooting you would have been murder. I am a fighter pilot, not a murderer. I could not kill you. I would not kill you." Brown understood. He'd made similar choices during his career. Moments where honor mattered more than victory. Times when doing the right thing meant ignoring orders. The two men became close friends. They lived 100 miles apart. They visited each other regularly. They attended air shows together. They spoke at veteran events, telling their story, emphasizing that even in war, humanity could survive. In 1992, they collaborated on a book with author Adam Malkos. A Higher Call was published in 2008. It became an international bestseller. Their story resonated across generations and nationalities, proof that individual conscience could override military indoctrination, that mercy could exist even in history's most brutal conflict. Franz Stigler died on the 22nd of March, 2008, at age 92. Charlie Brown died on the 24th of November 2008, at age 87, 8 months apart. Friends until the end. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories of humanity in war every day. Stories that prove even in the darkest times, honor and mercy can survive. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Are you watching from Germany, United States, Canada, somewhere else? Our community stretches across the world. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown's story doesn't disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered, not just as warriors, but as men who proved that conscience matters more than victory.